4 centuries, the Ottoman Empire had been a giant, a sprawling power stretching across continents. But by the dawn of the 20th century, this giant was ailing. Known as the sick man of Europe, its grip was loosening, its foundations trembling. Decades of slow decline, internal rot, and external pressure had taken their toll. The once mighty empire was a shadow of its former self, its vast territories in the Balkans simmering with nationalism and ambition. The air was thick with change, and the world watched, wondering not if, but when the final collapse would come. The story of its last, desperate years is a dramatic tale of revolution, betrayal, and war, a cascade of events that would not only seal the empire's fate but also set the stage for a global conflict unlike any the world had ever seen. The first tremor of the final earthquake came from within. In 1908, a group of reform-minded military officers known as the Young Turks staged a revolution. They were tired of the absolute rule of Sultan Abdulhamid II, tired of the corruption and stagnation. Their goal was to modernize the empire, to restore the constitution of 1876, and to create a unified Ottoman identity that could hold the diverse empire together. For a moment, there was a wave of euphoria. In the streets of Constantinople and across the Balkans, people of all faiths and ethnicities, Turks, Greeks, Bulgarians, Arabs, Armenians, and Jews, celebrated together. It felt like a new dawn. The promise of liberty, equality, and fraternity echoed through the empire. This was their chance to rebuild, to become strong again, to shed the sick man label once and for all. But this hope, this beautiful, fragile dream, was destined to be shattered. The divisions were too deep, the nationalist fires too strong. Instead of uniting the empire, the revolution inadvertently weakened the central authority, creating a power vacuum that its enemies were all too eager to exploit. The brief moment of unity faded, and the old tensions quickly resurfaced, more volatile than ever before. While the Ottomans were distracted by their internal struggles, their rivals were watching like vultures. The empire's weakness was an open secret, and the Young Turks' revolution, despite its noble intentions, had only made it more apparent. In 1911, Italy, hungry for its own colonial empire and a place in the sun, decided to strike. They saw their chance to seize the Ottoman provinces of Tripolitania and Cyrenaica in North Africa, what we now know as Libya. The Italo-Turkish War was a brutal wake-up call for Constantinople. The Ottoman army, disorganized and in the midst of reforms, was no match for the modern Italian military. The empire's navy, a ghost of its former glory, couldn't even challenge Italy's control of the Mediterranean. The war exposed the empire's military vulnerability to the entire world. More importantly, it sent a clear signal to the small, ambitious nations of the Balkans. If Italy could so easily carve off a piece of the empire, why couldn't they? The scent of blood was in the water, and the wolves were gathering. The loss of Libya was not just a territorial defeat, it was a profound humiliation that signaled the beginning of the end. The Italian victory was the spark that lit the Balkan powder keg. The newly independent states of Bulgaria, Serbia, Greece, and Montenegro had long harbored ambitions to liberate what they saw as their ethnic brethren still living under Ottoman rule. They also coveted the remaining Ottoman territories in Europe, Macedonia, Thrace, and Albania. For years, their individual rivalries had prevented them from cooperating. They squabbled over the future spoils of Macedonia more than they fought their common enemy. But Italy's success changed everything. With careful and cunning Russian diplomacy acting as a midwife, these bitter rivals began to see the power of a united front. In 1912, they did the unthinkable. They put aside their differences and secretly forged a series of alliances, creating the Balkan League. Their stated goal was reform and autonomy for the Christian populations within the Ottoman Empire. But their real, unspoken aim was far more radical: to drive the Ottoman Empire out of Europe once and for all, and to divide the conquered lands among themselves. The trap was set. The Ottomans, still reeling from the war with Italy, and blind to the scale of the conspiracy brewing on their doorstep, were about to walk right into it. In October 1912, the storm finally broke. The Balkan League issued an ultimatum to the Ottoman Empire, demanding reforms they knew would be rejected. When the Ottomans predictably refused, the League declared war. The First Balkan War began. The Ottoman High Command was shockingly overconfident. They vastly underestimated the strength, coordination, and patriotic fervor of the Balkan armies. They expected a quick victory, but what they got was a catastrophe. The Allied armies, well prepared and highly motivated, launched a coordinated offensive on all fronts. The Bulgarian army smashed through Ottoman defenses in Thrace, driving towards Constantinople itself. The Serbs and Montenegrins pushed deep into Macedonia and Albania. The Greek navy seized control of the Aegean Sea, cutting off Ottoman reinforcements and supplies to the islands and coastal cities. The Ottoman military, plagued by poor leadership, logistical chaos, and the political turmoil of the Young Turk era, simply crumbled. Within weeks, an empire that had dominated the region for 500 years was in a state of total collapse. The speed and scale of the defeat were stunning. The invincible image of the Ottoman soldier was shattered, replaced by scenes of panicked retreat and humiliating surrender. As the Balkan armies closed in, chaos engulfed the Ottoman capital. The military disaster led to a political one. In January 1913, with the Bulgarian army just miles from the gates of Constantinople and the government on the verge of accepting humiliating peace terms, a radical faction of the Young Turks led by the fiery Enver Pasha staged a dramatic coup. They stormed the Sublime Porte, the centre of government, shot the Minister of War, and forced the Grand Vizier to resign. They seized power, promising to reverse the tide of the war and save the honour of the empire. But it was a desperate, futile gesture. Enver Pasha's new government renewed the fighting, but the military situation was hopeless. The key fortress cities of Adrianople and Ioannina, which had held out for months, finally fell. The Ottoman army was broken beyond repair. By the spring of 1913, they were forced to sue for peace. The resulting Treaty of London was a final, crushing humiliation. The Ottoman Empire lost virtually all of its remaining territory in Europe. A new state, Albania, was created. The rest of the spoils were divided among the victorious Balkan League. 500 years of Ottoman presence in Europe had been wiped out in just over 7 months. The end of the First Balkan War marked the end of an era. The Ottoman Empire, once a global superpower that had laid siege to Vienna, was now reduced to a small sliver of land in Europe, essentially just the area around its capital, Constantinople. The loss was not just territorial. It was a deep psychological blow. The empire had lost the very lands from which it had sprung, the heart of its European identity for half a millennium. The dream of a multi-ethnic, multi-religious Ottoman state was dead, replaced by the harsh reality of aggressive ethno-nationalism. The Balkan Wars, including a second, brief conflict where the former allies fought each other over the spoils, redrew the map of southeastern Europe. But they did more than that. They created a new and even more volatile political landscape. The power vacuum left by the Ottoman retreat, the resentments from the division of territory, and the supercharged nationalism of the victorious states created a tinderbox. Serbia, emboldened and enlarged, now had its eyes on the Austro-Hungarian Empire and its South Slav populations. The great powers, Austria-Hungary, Russia, Germany, all watched with growing alarm, their own interests and alliances drawing them deeper into the Balkan quagmire. The region became, more than ever, the powder keg of Europe, just waiting for a single spark to ignite a continental, and then a global, conflagration. The Balkan Wars were a dress rehearsal for a much larger conflict. The tactics, the nationalist passions, the brutal ethnic violence, and the tangled web of alliances all foreshadowed what was to come. The Ottoman Empire, shattered and seeking revenge and a way to reclaim its lost glory, would make a fateful decision. It would ally itself with Germany and the Central Powers. This choice would drag it into the First World War, a conflict that would prove to be its final, agonizing death throw. The empire that had survived for 600 years, that had shaped the history of 3 continents, would not survive the Great War. Its final collapse would give birth to the modern Middle East, with new borders, new conflicts, and new nations, including the Republic of Turkey, rising from its ashes. The road from the Young Turk Revolution to the Balkan Wars was a short but bloody one, a final, frantic descent that ended an empire and set the world on a path to unimaginable destruction. Thank you for watching. If you found this history interesting, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories from the past.